Well, good afternoon or evening. It is Friday, February 18th. It's a little after 7:30 and Bitcoin is trading at around 68,000, almost 69,000. More or less the same place it's been for the last few days. Some days people say, Weisberger, you're an idiot when it's down to 66. And today they say, oh, wow, look how smart you are that it's up to 69. I mean, in Bitcoin terms, that's nothing. But the idea that Bitcoin will stay in a range because selling is exhausted and a new direction will establish itself in all likelihood higher via a grinding rally and nothing sharp seems to me pretty obvious. But look, markets are not obvious. And the reason that I put past performance is not a guarantee of future results as the title is because people forget it. This notion that is so pervasive in the Bitcoin community of a 4-year cycle and people KOLs that correctly called the top of the market, resting on their laurels and basically all but begging their followers to short the market or to at the very least stay out of the market here is just, well, frankly, it's wrong. It's wrong for a lot of reasons. I mean, you could believe it, but one of the things that we've noticed, and I commented about this today, there are two basic things I want to talk about. Thing number one is common sense. What we know, and we know this from human behavior, is that people, when they start to not believe their own bullshit, they don't have humility in the markets, is they double up as they succeed. And so they take their profits, they reinvest it, they increase their leverage, increase the size of their positions. There's a word for this. The CME, if you take the Series 3, will tell you have to know the word. It's called pyramiding. And it's a very popular concept. The problem is people who do that often, despite being right, more often than not, the last time they're wrong, and that wipes them out completely. And that happens to so many people. So be very careful who you listen to. So this narrative that says that we have to go lower, that we have to test the 55 level, and we have to test the 45 level, different words for different folks, the realized level and the average level, whatever, levels that people are looking at is just nonsense. Can it happen? Sure. But do 3 data points make it certain? No. Now, a few days ago, I went through the mathematical reasons and the chart reasons and a bunch of other reasons. But the most important reason is don't bet the farm. And so there are 2 pieces of analysis that you need to look at when understanding this market. First, if you sell Bitcoin and you had it from a much lower price level, like some of us have, then when you sell, you're going to pay, depending on what state you live in, anywhere from 24% to as much as 40% taxes. That means you have to be right by more than 25 to 40% in terms of when you sell and when you buy back in. That is a hell of a hurdle rate. And while it may turn out in retrospect to be right, the level of confidence you need to make such a sale is crazy. Now, can you trade leaving your regular account alone and just use a separate account with leverage, whether it's IBET options or with futures or perpetual swaps? If you want to short it and trade it, sure, you can do that. And the people who are really good at trading will make money, but most of us are not. And you should be very honest with yourself. If there's one discipline that requires self-honesty and reflection, it's trading. Because if in fact you listen to those influencers and you do use a lot of leverage, and you will find your trading account most of the time getting liquidated and wiped out. And we've seen this so many times on both the upside, people trading false breakouts, and the downside, people trading false breakdowns. Now, if you were one of the lucky ones who called it at 120, 115 and rode it all the way down to 60 and bought back then, great. Or if you're still short, okay, you could have a stop loss level that's reasonable in the 70s or something. That's okay. You've made money. But if you're pyramiding up on this position now, keep in mind 2 things. The first, which was in an earlier video, I won't go through it in detail, is that this market is very different than past markets. In past markets, we had a massive bull run fueled by retail and herd mentality. This time, the bull run, to the extent that it was a bull run, was not fueled by retail. In fact, retail was totally non-existent. It was fueled by new entrants via ETFs and via institutions. That's where the new entrants came from. That's going to have a very different dynamic. In fact, we've already seen it. Despite a massive 50% crash, which people in the ETF market were not supposed to, had never seen before, only 10% of ETF holders liquidated. Now, I point this out because one of the people who are calling for further pain in Bitcoin is Jim Bianco. Jim Bianco does a research letter, and he does some interesting work, but he made one of the most all-time stupid calls in history 2 years ago. And I called him out on it 2 years ago. So I'm happy to take the victory lap. Not on the price, but he said when there is a big fall and a correction, the ETF holders will run to the exits, causing, and I quote, the fall to be exacerbated, end quote. Well, guess what? Didn't happen. And we understand why it didn't happen for a whole host of reasons. Now, the second thing is an article that I published this morning, which I thought was interesting and I wanted to point out, which is if you actually price Bitcoins in gold and not in dollars, you get a very different answer. Now, why does that make sense? Well, it makes sense because there have been, since the Bitcoin cycles have started, hell, since the pandemic, we've added 45% more dollars in circulation. So the price levels, the nominal price levels, should be much higher. So it shouldn't surprise anyone if the magnitude of the correction is less. But just to quantify it, I went back and looked versus gold. And if you read the article, which is posted on X, you can see that during the 17 correction, that's 18 correction really, the drawdown percentage in gold was 84%. So almost as big as in dollars. In the 2022 correction, the total was 77%. And keep in mind that it was only 67% before that last fall down on the day that FTX went kaput. So understanding that 67% is an important number. Now, why do we care? Because this correction from October through February in gold terms is already down 67%. Yes, I paused for a second to let it sink in. This correction in gold terms was as severe as the 22 correction from peak to right before the FTX final run down. So unless you believe that there will be another wave of forced selling, which by the way, quickly corrected, so we know that it wasn't enduring. If you believe there will be another round of forced selling, then you have to be thinking that 60,000 which is where the 67% was probably a bottom. And I, for one, think that is by far the most likely scenario. We've seen sentiment indicators being that way and others. So why am I saying it this way? And why do I say past performance is not a guarantee of future results? Well, it's simple. Here we're going into the weekend. Anything can happen on the weekend because it's less liquid. There are people out there who might have built up a long spot, short perp position to try to slam the market down. I don't think this is the right weekend to try it, but people might. And if they do, we might see a wick down. But if you do see that wick down, and if you do have a leveraged short position, take advantage of it and get the heck out. At least that's what I would say to you. That said, it's not investment advice. Do your own research, but understand the dynamics of what's going on. So repeat after me. I will not follow influencers with leverage. I will not follow influencers with leverage. I will not follow influencers with leverage. Okay, that's my PSA for the day. Have a great weekend, everyone. We'll see you again next week.